All right, we're going to continue on with our availabilities this afternoon at Martinsville Speedway. We are now joined by Denny Hamlin, driver of the number 11 FedEx Toyota. Denny, you arrived last week at Talladega, noting post-race that you're confident heading into the round of 8. Talk about how your demeanor has changed this week versus last, knowing that you're heading into a race where you've experienced success over your career.
It's good. I mean, obviously, you always prepare for the worst going into the weekend, but obviously we knew last weekend we had a good chance to go out there and win, and if not win, run good. And, I thought in my head that if I finished top 3, then it would give us a good shot to move on. Obviously, there were a lot of circumstances that all played into that, but we finished top 3 and we barely moved on. So it all worked out. Fortunate for us, and now we come here to a bunch of really good racetracks for us, and hopefully one of these will get us into that Final Four.
All right, we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. We'll start with Jonathan and then come up to Tom. Second row.
Jonathan Merriman, NASCAR.com. Denny, last fall, Penske controlled the restarts here, both teammates. Have you guys talked about maybe a similar strategy to ensure that, all 4 JGR cars are up front and stay up front?
We haven't talked about it yet. I think that it's all situational, dependent on where you're at. I think with this, we're probably going to have a little different racetrack, I think, this weekend. It looks like the rubber that was here from the late model race is staying on the racetrack. We're going to have warmer temperatures, so I think that rubber will lay down a little bit more. So I think that the outside line won't be quite as big of a disadvantage this time around as what we've seen in the past, so you may not have to do it.
All right, we'll go to Tom and then Nate.
Danny, Tom Jensen, FoxSports.com. With you being so good at this track and having 5 wins already, does that make this a must-win for you? Does it make it anything less than a victory is a disappointment here?
I think every time I come here, anything other than a victory for sure is a disappointment. We come here expecting to win every time we come. It doesn't always work out that way. It turns out about 1 out of every 4. Since our last one, this is 4, so it's about time that we win. I thought in the spring we had a really good car. It just made one mistake on entry of one corner, and it cost us. But things a lot learned. From that, hopefully don't happen again. And I definitely don't see it as a must-win as far as our championship hopes. But a lot of things can happen in this round, and really, you're not going to have 8 guys run these 3 races with no issues. So you still going to have to be consistent in the long run.
All right, we'll go to Nate and then Jared and Claire.
Nate Ryan, NBC Sports. Denny, kind of in that vein, Kyle Larson bumped you from the top of the speed chart toward the end of practice. I look and I see he's also tops in 10 consecutive lap average. I'm thinking maybe he's becoming a contender, but then I see you didn't run 10 laps. Jimmy didn't run 10 laps. And I know that in the past you've said in practice there's only a few guys you're looking at, and it's 48 and a few others. Is that still hold true, and who are you looking at as the stiffest competition Sunday?
Well, I think that, there's a handful of guys that always seem to show up in the race. There's some guys definitely can run some fast laps in qualifying trim. I don't know where we're at in race trim quite yet because we haven't been there. We wanted to save that set of tires for tomorrow. But typically, yes, I only pay attention to probably 5 guys. But those guys I know, especially the 42, has gotten a lot better here over the last few races. So, he'll probably be added to that list for sure. But, you really just never see surprises here. You never look back at a Martinsville victory and not one I can really think of and say, wow, that can't believe that guy won. So it's usually the same old faces and the guys that have good experience and a lot of experience here.
All right, we'll go to Jared and then come up to Claire. Jared's to your left.
Yeah, Jared Turner, Anthem Media Group. Denny, just knowing what Dale Jr. means to the sport, what do you think it would mean, to the sport for him to be able to come back at Daytona? And how do you think that might, further, ratchet up the excitement for, what's already the biggest event of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously is a huge part of our sport for sure. It's definitely not the same without him on the racetrack or at a racetrack on any given weekend. But every Daytona 500 is very big. But I'm sure one with if he's able to come back, I'd say it'd be a pretty big one for sure. So I know it'd be big for him. I know he's been working very hard physically to try to get back to where he needs to be. So I look forward to racing with him again for sure.
All right, we'll go to Claire and then Lee.
Claire Relang, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio. Two quick things. One, for your team in particular, pit road and pit road speeding at this track to make sure that nothing goes wrong there. And the second question, given the teamwork that you guys had, Talladega is now over. When is it kind of all for one? You guys will work together, but, all of a sudden everyone starts to get selfish.
Yeah, it's hard not to be selfish, but, it also, you can hurt your overall performance these last 4 races if you start to get selfish. So there's not one thing that I'll ever hold back from any of my teammates at any time, especially at this racetrack or any other that they ask me something about, and I would expect the same when we get to somewhere where I need some help as well. So, I think that teamwork's what got us here, and you can't veer away from that. I mean, we all feel like selfishly we can beat each other, and that'd be a good problem to have once we got to Homestead, is to have to race each other for a championship. So I'm looking forward to that part of it. But as far as the penalties, it's just last week was just a mistake. It wasn't like I was trying to be fast on pit road. I just overshot it when I was coming to pit road, and luckily I didn't end up through the grass. I was going so fast. So I'll tidy him up, and hopefully we've had our last one of the year. I know NASCAR's probably going to add timing lines here. This has always been a track where you can gain a lot of positions on pit road based off of your stall and pit road timing lines. But if they add those timing lines, there'll be no games to be played, no spots to be gained by playing games. The only thing you might see is people playing that inside-outside lane on pit exit. But I'll make sure I'll be a little conservative. There's no reason. If there's one track we should never push the limit on pit road, for me, it's probably this one for me. So we got to make sure we don't do that.
All right, we'll go to Lee and then back to our left.
SpencerMotorsport.com. Do you think it is the additional timing lines that have been added this year that have led to so many, I hate to call them mistakes, but, misfortunes for you on pit road?
Yeah, I think there's just less opportunity to fix a problem. Anytime you go over pit road speed inside the car, you usually have, on average, before they added the timing lines, about 5 pit boxes to get it back. When you go over, you went over by, let's call it 4 lights, where you need to be 4 lights under your limit before 5 pit boxes. Well, now they've added them to where there's such small sections. If you go over just for a split second, there's just not enough room for you to gain that back. So no doubt the addition of the timing lines is added for more penalties, but it's also kept overall speed on pit road slower, which is safer for everyone on pit road.
Do you study those intensely? Would that be like any of us taking homework home, and you are very aware of where they are? And finally, with the problems that you have had on pit road, whether it's you or other issues, have you done any team building exercises with the 11 just to kind of feel like you guys are all on the same page and avoid the choke factor in the chase?
Yeah, I think that everyone wants to do the best job they can, for sure. I think that pressure is a situation I like to be in. Anytime I've faced elimination, I had an elimination race, I've been on the outside, I've made it in. I like those situations, but sometimes mechanical stuff just happens, and it's not something anyone on the crew can fix, and especially if it's parts and pieces. That's the tough part about it. But I think as far as the pit road, I study pit road I would think as much as anyone in the circuit. I know where every line is. I know going into a weekend, I know the 4 stalls that I want right away before the weekend even starts. What stalls I want to optimize pit road. But you got to qualify well to do it, and we've qualified good enough this year. We've pretty much gotten the stalls that we've wanted. But with those stalls comes there's a risk reward. And we've been one of the fastest, if not the fastest driver on pit road as far as rolling times, but we've also been penalized the most. So there's that risk reward that you got to just back down a little bit, especially when you get into these final few races where you can't make any mistakes.
All right, we'll go over to our left and then to David Scott.
Denny, the lights are creating a lot of excitement here around the track because they're going to be adding them next year. What do you think? What could that add to your racing, and what do you think it adds to Martinsville?
It'd be huge for the speedway for sure. I mean, I know that night racing is always more exciting. Hopefully it's during the time of the year that it's not freezing cold at night. That would be ideal, but we're going to be blessed with some great weather this weekend, and obviously night races. I think the biggest thing is it gives us a bigger window in case of weather. This racetrack has really been hampered by weather over the last few years, and it gives us a little bit more of a time opening there to finish these races. So I know every year it just gets pushed back a little bit more, and we start to fight daylight at the end. I know last year was nearly dark when it finished, so I think the lights would be a cool addition. I'd love to see the late model race or something here run under the lights first. That'd definitely be cool to watch.
All right, David.
David Scott from the Charlotte Observer. Denny, you've run 2 Xfinity races this year, both doing pretty well. What's your opinion of the eligibility rule change, and what goes into your decisions on how many and which ones to run each race?
Yeah, it obviously won't affect me at all. I think really there's only probably 2 or 3 guys that this really affects, but I definitely agree with not running in the chase races or cutoff races for those guys because there's just too much at stake for those racing for the championship in those trucks and Xfinity series. Especially when you have a guy that's trying to get a first-time win and move himself on to the next round of the chase, and a Cup or Xfinity driver moves down and takes a win. I guess you could say it's a level playing field, but I mean they're in the Sprint Cup Series for a reason. They're really good drivers, and obviously I think the end result of all this is going to be positive. It's going to help make for exciting races, and those guys, all these standalone events have had great races, and so I think that you could potentially see even more action with trucks only and Xfinity only drivers participating in their events.
All right, we'll go to Dustin and finish up with Jim.
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. A couple things. One, to ask you about the temperature. With it being about 15 degrees warmer than what it's been the last couple of years, what kind of impact does that have in light of with the tires? Since it's been last year, you lost a set, and I know the first year everybody kind of struggled with keeping sets on the car. How might that affect things, or how might you have to drive with the 10 sets and the warmer weather on Sunday than what you've had in the last year here?
I don't think, from the driving standpoint, I don't think we'll be any different. I won't do anything different, but I can assure you that I'm sure that there'll be, things. The car's going to react different with warmer weather here. These tires, are very, very sensitive to temperature. I know that they did a tire test here to try to lay more rubber down because the last 2 to 3 years we've had no rubber laid down, and that's really pinned the line to the very bottom of the racetrack. As rubber gets laid down, the track gets a little bit wider and gets a little bit racier, and I think with this warmer temperature, it's going to lay rubber. The track's going to get wider, so you're probably going to see some of the best racing you've seen here probably in a while this weekend because of the temperature. I know going forward, next year's tire will lay rubber, or should lay rubber, even in the cooler temperatures. So I think Goodyear has identified that and is gauged toward that for the future. But I definitely don't think that you necessarily can come back here with something that you've been successful with over the last 2 races and think you're going to be successful this time because of this temperature. This is a very sensitive track as far as temperature is concerned.
I also want to ask you just about the Xfinity rule that you were talking about earlier. Is obviously some younger drivers still can compete in some of those races, and those are guys who could be competing in the chase next year and could be competing at those tracks in an Xfinity car the same weekend. Can that provide an advantage for a younger driver over somebody like you to be able to get that little bit more track time in that car? Is that lack of a better term, a loophole that might be there, or something that should be looked at before next season?
I think that the whole, what is it, like 5 years or something? No more your Chase and those guys, yeah. I mean, it might be a small advantage, but I never race on Saturdays anyway. Even if I had a choice, I wouldn't be racing on Saturdays or Fridays. So if I thought it was that big of an advantage, I would go do it myself.
All right, we'll finish up with Jim Utter.
Jim Utter, motorsport.com. Denny, I was just wondering, your teammates have caught a lot of grief the last couple of weeks for what they did last weekend in the race, something which many drivers have done over the course of the last few years. I just wondered if you thought that was fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was smart. From my standpoint, I knew we had a very uphill battle because we were not going to have any teammates all day. I knew we weren't going to have any teammates all day because we talked about we all knew what they were going to do before the race started. It's just everyone else saw it when it actually happened. But there's no way. They would be the dumbest group in history if they would have been in the middle of that pack and gotten wrecked at some point when they didn't have to be. So it's about championships. It's not about winning Talladega by any means. All those guys earn the right to do that by having a good first two races, and I think that next year with the format, with the races being switched around, you'll probably see you'll see less of that because people won't know where they stand. So I think it kind of fixes itself next year, most likely. But there's more chances of a big wreck there than any other racetrack. So you have to play the odds there. There's no way that those guys should have been up there helping me and then risk putting themselves at danger and not making the chase. And instead of Gibbs having 3 cars in the chase, they would have had 2 or maybe 1 if they would have been up there helping me and we got in a wreck. So luckily it all worked out. We have all 4, and they played the strategy they had to play to get in, and I did the strategy I had to do to get in. And nobody from any other team would have done anything different, that's for sure. If they told you different, that's a lie.
All right, thanks, Denny, and good luck this weekend.